Grazie Simona per l'introduzione, è un piacere per me di essere con voi. Io parlerò in inglese, cercherò di parlare in inglese perché non sapeva che il colloquio era soprattutto un colloquio italiano. Però tutti avete il testo in inglese fra voi e potete seguire, però io non voglio leggere tutto il testo, farò un piccolo riassunto. So, it is impossible to deal with the contribution of Portugal to second scholasticism without dealing with the school of Salamanca, the Spanish scholasticism, not the least because for 60 years, the two kingdoms were ruled by a sole crown. So as you see, I am going to deal mostly with Portuguese region. And if I have to say at the outset, what will be my main contention, it will be this following. I believe we should separate the Portuguese region when dealing with the Spanish scholasticism because it has a feature of its own. So expressions as the Spanish scholasticism of the 16th and 17th centuries or Iberian scholasticism to avoid any issues in identifying the school of Salamanca or any other schools for that matter, as used by a recent collective book that everybody knows, may constitute another problem. Because when we come to Portugal to face the situation in Portugal, it is imperative to introduce other periods in our history. Until today, no one has yet proposed historic frames for the beginning or the end of second scholasticism in Portugal. And so my proposal will be one of a scholastic and political nature as well. The terminus a quo being the decision to definitively locate in Coimbra the Portuguese University, 1537, and the terminus ad quem being the reformation of the same university by the Marquis of Pombal. And many other marks possible, a pamphlet just like the one the Trinitarians produced in Portugal in that year, 1772, is a committed testimony eager to break down with scholasticism, or in the political words of that document issued by the Trinitarians, to attribute to the absolutist king the initiative to move the country from the darkness to the light. So I am going naturally, now it is obvious that I'm going to stick to the Portuguese situation, but allow me also to privilege the situation of the Jesuits, even though I will speak also about University of Coimbra and the University of Évora, which is the last one, of course, Jesuit universities. Nevertheless, one is obliged to put into perspective Spanish scholasticism, the School of Salamanca, as well as the Society of Jesus as a whole, in the background of Portuguese scholasticism, an expression I used hereafter for the sake of my argument. Despite the meager state of the art related to the material object of my present research, I expect to present to you, my colleagues and friends, some data that will allow me to prove my point of view. Well, let me introduce you first the Portuguese scholastic situation. As it is well known, King Philip ordered the eminent Jesuit Francisco Soares to go to the University of Coimbra to assume the most prestigious share at the Faculty of Theology. In 1598, a royal decision such as this, to which Soares abided, though never willingly accepted, was surely grounded in a cultural and political vision. It has been said that King Philip wished to put the University of Coimbra side by side with the Salamanca one. Arguably, it was Philip's way of making a step further in the direction of King John III, political determination regarding the role the university should play in the Portuguese Empire after 1537. The 60 years mediating the two royal policies saw much water running on the Portuguese scholastic bridge, but if one is to admit that Soares and Molina became huge European commentators, King Philip's decision hit the target. Bear in mind that Molina was one of the names evoked when the crown was looking for a scholar to assume the tenure in Coimbra, but Soares' presence is sufficient enough to say that King Philip did manage to put Coimbra ahead of Salamanca, at least for a precise period of time. I would only recall the eagerness of the British ambassador in Lisbon to put his fingers in the text of Soares that he was writing in the university related to King James and immediately dispatched them to London. But the Portuguese situs or campus of the university received several French and Spanish inputs that can be very easily identified when King John III decided to put in the city of Coimbra the university for good. As regards the previous history of the Portuguese university during its stay in Lisbon, much less is known. It is puzzling, however, to say the least, that Master Guilherme Gomery received a mandate to lecture St. Thomas in Vésperas. In Portuguese, the text reads, Guilherme Gomes leia uma lição de São Tomás depois da lição de Prima. As early as 1542, a mandate to which Álvaro Gomes gave continuity. Arguably, this would mean that Aquinas' theological outlook was already being envisaged as such. But coming from Alcalá, Francisco de Monzón and Afonso de Prado, the former due to an invitation of King John III, were the first scholars to assume the chair of Prima. Coming from behind the Pyrenees, another geocultural input, this time in the chair of scripture, is clear for the Portuguese Marcos Romeiro and Paio Rodrigues Vilharinho, prestigious professors in Coimbra, got their degrees at the University of Paris. So when Soares finally succeeded the Portuguese Dominican António de São Domingos in the chair of Prima, the methodological presence of Salamanca was definitively established. The Spanish Dominican Martinho de Ledesma owns the merit of introducing Francisco Vitoria's decisive change of replacing Peter Lombard's sentences by Thomas Aquinas' Summa of Theology. And I shall call this input the methodological mark of Salamanca. When Ledesma, as well as the Portuguese Augustinian Francisco de Cristo in the chair of Vespers, published their own sentences, they were all approaching the latter in accordance with the structure of the Summa. However, the methodological mark of Salamanca has never been a straitjacket or universally accepted, for another Augustinian, Egídio da Apresentação, also lectured Scotus, and his name is just one of many other more names entrusted with the minor chair of Scotus. And some other indications could be given now, but you will find them in the text I have sent to the organizers. Some manuscripts that show the presence and lots of commentaries by on Scotus by the Dominicans, for instance, by orders other than the Franciscans. In spite of it, the methodological mark of Salamanca, just defined the subsidiary role of law in relation to theology and not the other way around, is present in the Royal University of Coimbra and its Jesuit counterpart in Évora as well. Recently, Lanza and Tost have proposed a shift from moral theology to juridical theology, evident in the works of Jesuits from Évora, Fernão Rebelo, Sebastião de Couto, Gaspar Miranda, Marco Vicente. If this juridical turn, as the authors call it, evidence the singularity of Évora in contrast with the movement initiated in Salamanca, this signals the inevitable relevance of the two Portuguese faculties of theology, but represents a serious obstacle to any autonomous intervention of both laws in human and political issues of importance. Just like the theologian Sebastião de Magalhães in Évora, in Coimbra, Francisco Soares was summoned for several times to resolve moral, practical, and legal issues, but Soares' approach did not always take its distance from the juridical point of view. Because both professors, these two Jesuits, Sebastião Magalhães and Francisco Soares, envisaged their task as being one of a theological nature, some attention to the law faculties, the two law faculties, is needed. I skip also this paragraph, this long paragraph regarding the faculties of laws, because you have it in your papers, probably already in your computer. So what about the faculty of theology? I trust that some of its specific features can be explained by national and cultural idiosyncrasies. With the passage of time, the Salamanca input starts to decline, not the least thanks to an obvious realpolitik, hence the presence in the university staff of professors of Portuguese religious families, such as the Order of Christ or the Order of St. John the Evangelist. As evidenced by the last appendix that you can find it in my paper, both these Portuguese orders knew 7 masters in Prima, a number whose total is more or less equivalent to the number of teachers in the chairs of Vespers. Of course, before its period of decline, Dominican António de São Domingos, who honed the chair of Prima for 20 years, is a fine example in Coimbra of the epistemological inclination of the Iberian faculties of theology towards moral and juridical matters, and hence with the downsizing of the two faculties of law. From this point of view, his Jesuit successor in the chair of Prima, meaning Soares, did not represent a substantial methodological shift, although it would be too poor to reduce the Suaresian contribution in Coimbra only to this legal chapter. Of course, there are the indications of other authorities in our scholasticism, such as Anselm's, Alexander of Wales, John of Baconthorpe, as everybody else, everywhere else. So what I could give you to give more strength to my argument would be, you can find it, so I will not read it, some statistics related to the presence of professors and their orders, their religious orders, and the texts they commented special on the Summa. But since you have this data in the last part of my paper, with your authorization, I will skip this part of my text and go to the following point, the following paragraph. I will only add that it seems that the Dominicans saw the decrease of their influence in Coimbra after James Arthur of Limerick, who owned the chair of Prima between 1639 and 1646, following his lectures in Naples and Avila, because he was replaced by the Benedictine Leão de São Tomás in the aftermath of the discussions regarding the dogma of the Immaculate Conception. And with the new dynasty in Portugal, which more or less coincides with the fourth and final period of the production of commentaries on Aquinas, according to the proposals by Lanza and Tost, Dom Luís de Cunha, Martinho Pereira, João Batista, etc. It's a very complicated, a lot of names, Portuguese names, and sometimes these Portuguese names sound to foreigners just like Russians. So I will skip this part, only saying that for me, the presence of the Irish author of Limerick marks the divide. After Limerick's tenure, the university cloisters witnessed to the significant entrance of several religious denominations, not the least the Portuguese ones, just like the Order of St. John the Evangelist, in the occasion through the presence of Luís de Chagas, teaching Prima and Vespers between 1638 and 1647. In contrast, the initial 68 years in the history of the chair of Prima only knew 3 professors, Ledesma, Domingos, and Soares. In the first appendix of my paper, you will find that during its second phase, the teachers succeeded in a number that is far from showing any signs of the maturity of the studies. Just like the number of teachers, the variety of religious order that entered into the cloisters university cannot be a sign of scholar stability, mainly because they stay there for a short period in most of the times. Another factor to be attentive to concerns the somehow different structure of the studies within a religious order and their relation with the plan of the theological courses of the 2 universities. You see, in fact, the University of Coimbra and University of Évora were really different, and the structure of their courses were comprehensible, understandable difference. Also, what is different is the structure or the academical structure of a biography of a Jesuit. And from this point of view, as I will show you later, this is a factor that must be one must be very attentive to. So let me now go to introduce you the scholastic situation of the Portuguese province of the Society of Jesus. Having begun as a minor Jesuit college after its foundation in 1559, the University of Coimbra, of Évora, became the second major school where theology was formally taught. The other establishment was the Coimbra College of Jesus, which must not be mistaken with the Coimbra College of Arts. So we have 3 schools teaching theology. At least from 1542, the former college began to offer, the Coimbra College of Jesus, offered small courses in humanities and philosophy, and of course, moral theology already and later in speculative theology. In the 1547, the teaching of humanities and philosophy was a reality in the Coimbra College of Arts under the exclusive guidance of the Crown from 1555 on, and the college received other orientation, for it was given to the patronage of the Society of Jesus by King John III. Remember, for instance, that Luís de Molina, for instance, entered in the Society of Coimbra and followed the lessons by Sebastião de Moraes in the College of Arts. In the Coimbra College of Jesus, Molina addressed the first part of Aquinas Summa in the Concordia, and only afterwards he headed towards Évora, where he wrote on law matters. But beside George Serrão, the first theologian to teach in Évora, the following theologians in Évora were of Spanish origin. However, despite their Spanish origin, Molina, Pérez, and Luís Boiter, known as Pedro Luís, they all received a significant input of Jesuit education already in Portugal. It has been said that Jesuit thought would have begun to take form from 1580, being in this respect divergent from Salamanca rigidness. The curious thing here is that if one takes a geopolitical point of view, and of course I cannot but stress here the geopolitical twist, in Portugal there was already a Jesuit thought previous to the 80s, laboratory by nature. This is not to say that in other parts of Europe, Jesuits like Francisco Toledo, Bennett Pereira, Gabriel Vasquez, Juan Maldonado, or many other names were not already doing Jesuit philosophy. No doubts they were doing it. But the problem is that no one of these Jesuits, or to no one of these Jesuits, was ever attributed the task of composing, if not the scholastic philosophy, at least the task of presenting a Jesuit philosophy in systematic and printed form, as it will happen with the Coimbra Jesuit commentary on Aristotle. Even though in the 1560s, Aquinas' Summa Theology was the most relevant subject matter in the University of Évora, together with an identical situation in the Coimbra College of Jesus, this may not amount to recognize the methodological mark of Salamanca and could be seen as an occasion to propose an outlook different from the eventually Dominican one. But another feature can be added. It is an epistemological feature strictly related to the Jesuits, the prohibition of the so-called betavasis eis allogenos. For the sake of my argument, I shall stick to Pedro de Fonseca's biography because it shows very well a specificity of a biography of a Jesuit. Fonseca is known for having written his metaphysics, but he was a theologian by nature. In his Examen pro Scholastics in 1556, he admits specifically his real interest in theology. In 1564, he coins the expression Aristotelian turn to identify the program he foresees for the Coimbra Academy. In the October of the same year, he teaches speculative theology in Évora, after a similar experience in the College of Jesus, where he had lectured the Treaty on Predestination. So he was indeed a theologian by nature. And just like Pedro de Fonseca, Sebastião do Couto, who is the author of the volume on the Dialectica, that belongs to the Coimbra Jesuit course, spent his academic life mostly in Évora and with a firm relation with theology. Based on data collected by Stegmuller, a Jesuit career could go like this. From the 96 Jesuit professors of the theology and philosophy between 1555 and 1603, 37 of them taught in more than one scholar established, or more than one subject matter, and 29 taught only in Coimbra, 32 in Évora, and 4 in the Jesuit schools of the two cities. But much more important than this is the fact that they mixed the teaching of philosophy with the teaching of theology. And there are various situations, very biographical situations of Jesuits who combine, for better or worse, these two disciplines. I'll give you also these informations, so I skip and go to the final part of my text to conclude. And the conclusion is strictly related to, of course, the Coimbra philosophical course and its significance in second scholasticism. Please bear in mind that we have three important names: Pedro de Fonseca, Sebastião do Couto, and Manuel de Góis. Pedro da Fonseca and Sebastião do Couto had a close connection to theology. That was not the case of Sebastião do Couto, because he died before he could enter into the the teaching of theology. Well, I could see Fonseca playing the role in an eventual school of Coimbra, just like Victoria's in Salamanca. And if I assume this, I could even propose to you the discussion about a possible definition, an integrative definition of the School of Salamanca, it's like the Belle de Plans did for the School of Salamanca. The School of Coimbra would be a philosophical community of thinkers, professors and commentators with a proper Aristotelian attitude toward the knowledge of their time, initially rooted in the Coimbra College of Jesus, whose main representatives were, of course, the three ones already named, who managed to publish first a philosophical course that knew, second, a national transformation, third, a transnational influence, and fourth, that was if this influence was eventually received in the latter geography, meaning the eastern regions, as an opportunity to present Aristotelian philosophy and an utopian presentations of the principles of knowledge to Eastern audience. Well, I have no time to give you, to propose you and to discuss all these four issues. So just allow me 2 or 3 more minutes to tell you 2 things before I finish my presentation. The first one is to present you the importance of 2 indexes that Fonseca wrote and published at the beginning of the 2nd volume of the Metaphysics, the Index of Philosophy and the Index of Theology, and that gives a very good argument, a very sound argument, not only of his own point of view in relation to what a philosophical course should have been, but also with this attachment relation to theology. So when Fonseca writes his Metaphysics, from epistemological point of view, he was committing, he was entering into the prohibition of metabasis as eis allogenos, because he was reading metaphysics from a theological point of view. And this perspective of Fonseca is very clear in a book in a second course in the history of the Jesuits in Portugal, the book of Balthazar Teles, who has this interesting title of combining philosophy but with theology and saying that we are going to read philosophy, but looking already to the problems that theologians must deal with. The last information, and then I will finish. Since the formation of Couto is a philosophical one, a strictly philosophical one by nature, what we find is, and Couto and Geuss, Couto and Geuss do agree in this subject, was to transform the subalternation theory of Aquinas with the metabasis theory by Aristotle, but according to the second analytics. And this is very interesting, and it's clear because it appears that this transition, when they deal with the relations of several sciences, this happens with Couto and Geuss. However, a difference between Couto and Geuss appears, and between Couto and between Geuss and Fonseca appears, and this difference is related to the role of philosophy instead of theology. And this huge presence of philosophy, this huge commitment to philosophy must or should have been explained and justified. So what is interesting, and this is my last word, what is really interesting is to see how, for instance, Couto provides arguments for the rehabilitation of this Prisca knowledge of the presence of a one only and sole structure in order to read the entire culture, not only Christian philosophy, but even the Eastern philosophy or the Eastern thought. Because, as he says in one of the first pages of his work, he says, I quote and I finish, the Assyrian and Persian Magi, the Egyptian priests, the Bactrian shamans, the Indian Brahmins, the Druids of the Gauls, the sages of the Greeks, the doctors of the Latins went back to one and primal font, God, the creator, who gave it to Adam and his children, to all the nations of the earth. So this is combined, is an interesting combination with Neoplatonism with Stoic logos. So, and this combination added universality to perpetuity, and it is for perhaps a very good hint of why this course had a huge penetration in Eastern regions. Thank you very much.